What is something about yourself that sounds totally made up, but is 100% real? I was the best man on both sides of a lesbian wedding, because I had dated both the bride and the bride, stayed close friends, and introduced them to each other after our breakups. You, sir, are a true bro. Yeah, he may not be a girl, but he was the best man they ever dated. I was at a store when Tony Hawk was signing autographs. I was only 10 at the time, and was a huge fan. One of his early video games had just come out. The store had a couple TVs on the wall and some video games to play. Being a kid, I waited for one controller to open up and someone leave. A kid ended up leaving, and I grabbed the controller and started playing and minding my own business. A couple minutes later, the store wanted to grab photos of Tony playing his own video game. He came over and grabbed the second controller and began to play multiplayer with me. Probably played for 10 minutes. The bonus was it was also my 10th birthday. So I played Tony Hawk Pro Skater with Tony Hawk. I never graduated high school, but I have a bachelor's degree. I was homeschooled and my mom never went through the legal steps to actually get me a real diploma, so she made one in Photoshop that was then used to get me into this podunk community college that didn't verify it. From there I got my associate's degree, which I then used to get into a decent university where I got my bachelor's. I homeschooled and didn't have a legit transcript when I applied for college. I made one on my computer. They accepted it. I was shocked. I'm allergic to lettuce. Like I carry an EpiPen allergic. Really, lettuce? Like all lettuce? Yup. My great-grandfather worked in the textile business and started importing rayon fabric from Japan in the late 60s and 70s. Keep in mind this was during the early days of synthetic fabrics, and traveling to Japan was not all that common. On a business trip, he met some Japanese businessmen who were selling newly designed transistor radios. His contacts wanted to set up an exclusive import agreement for their electronics to North America, but my great-grandfather declined, because how many of these radios could you possibly sell? Turns out that was a short-sighted business decision, because that company was called Sony Electronics. He turned down the exclusive import contract for Sony. On the other side of my family, my Canadian relatives walked away from 100 acres of land in Alberta during the Dust Bowl and Great Depression. They decided it was not worth paying the taxes on their land. Turns out that land was right in the heart of the Alberta oil deposits. Also on my mother's side of the family, they used to have a citrus orchard near Los Angeles. They sold it cheap to some land developers. That farm was right at Hollywood and Vine. My family on both sides is bad at seeing long-term investments. So, dump any stocks recently. I took my mother for a surprise trip to New York City. She got married to my father there in '68. The surprise was manufactured by way of telling her we were going to Australia. We live in New Zealand, so a trip to Australia is not a huge deal. It's the type of thing you could do for the weekend. And therefore she packed a bag and brought her passport. We got to the airport and said, surprise, we are going to New York. And she cried her eyes out with delight. When we arrived on our first morning, I said, okay, what do you want to do? She said, when I was last here in 1968, the Twin Towers weren't complete, so I'd like to go to the top of them. Your wish is my command. I said, and off we went to the WTC. That was the afternoon of September 10th, 2001. Suffice it to say, there was a particular poignancy when we looked out the window at around 8 AM the next morning. My husband, I'm 30, has been my best friend since I was 7. He was the new kid at school and I walked up to him and said, we are going to be best friends. He said, no we aren't. Leave me alone. I bugged him every day for 2 weeks. Before he finally said, if I'll be your friend, will you shut up about it? We were married 20 years later. And that, kids, is how I met your mother. When I was a kid, I woke up to find my cat giving birth to her kittens on my pillow, 1 inch from my face. I took it as a compliment. It totally is. That's like the cat Congressional Medal of Honor. I got hernia by sneezing too hard. My great-great-grandfather was a Pinkerton detective, acted on vaudeville, and had 5 wives in 2 different states that knew nothing of each other. He also slightly changed his last name each time, and never got caught until Ancestry website happened lol. Sounds a bit like my great-grandfather. He had a wife in France, and then 2 in the US in neighboring counties. He was caught though. My great-grandmother was wife #2. She found out about wife #3 and divorced him. No one knew about the first wife in France until I pulled his service records from WWI. I had my tongue surgically enhanced for more reach and flexibility when I was 8. Edit. I'm super jazzed by how many of us are out there. I once successfully ran an unfunded shelter for 100 homeless veterans as a homeless civilian. My family ancestry can be traced back to a court jester who served in the court of King Jacob IV of Sweden. Whenever someone calls you a fool, you're just carrying on the legacy. My grandfather went AWOL on the French Foreign Legion and was banned from ever going back to France. All because he left to marry my grandmother. Husband and I fell in love at first sight. Moved in together after 2 days. Married 5 months later. Still married. It will be 40 years in May. Congrats on 40 years. That's amazing. I want to find love like that someday. I accidentally swallowed a small fish while snorkeling in Singapore. Did you then feel gilu in your stomach? When I swallowed a very alive fish, I was mildly nauseated for about 2 days. My dad's name is Luigi and my uncle's name is Mario. They are brothers. ETA, I forgot to add that my dad is also a plumber. This is my favorite of them all. I built a 13-foot tall T-Rex with Christopher Walken's head, and New York Magazine called it highbrow and brilliant. I died first, and then was born. I've told this story a few times on Reddit, but I enjoy telling it, so here we go again. During the cesarean to bring me into the world, there was some major complication on my mother's end. She started bleeding internally, drowning me in the womb. When I was removed, the doctors tried to get me breathing but couldn't. I was declared dead. My mother was still unconscious, but my dad was brought in to say goodbye to me. He held me in his arms, was saying goodbye when out of nowhere I started coughing up blood and screaming as babies do. Apparently it was the weirdest moment in his life, being abjectly terrified and overwhelmed with joy that I was alive. It's my favorite story to tell, because weirdly it takes some pressures off on birthdays. I don't do well with too much attention by family/friends, but celebrating my death day doesn't bring people the same connotations. I was once sponsored by the Crunk Energy Drink Company for sailing. I imagine I was the only sailor on their list. I literally just emailed them saying that I sailed and asked if they wanted me to put stickers on my boat. They sent me a few cases of the drink, t-shirts, hats, the works. My car was known as the Crunk Mobile. Once in college I applied for a job at the library help desk. I figured I would help people find books. Didn't give it much more thought than that. During the interview, I aced all of the customer service questions. Then they asked me whether I knew how to defrag a hard drive. Cue alarm bells in my head, but I kept calm outwardly and said no, but you can teach me. I worked in it for 3 years by accident. They were too nice to fire me. I made my last boss swear on her life she wouldn't call me for tech support. They call my cell when I'm sick in bed and ask how to reinstall the printer not a dang week later. I found out my father wasn't my biological father in 10th grade biology class. We were learning about blood types and trays. I raised my hand thinking I was a smart ass. Your chart isn't accurate. My dad has AB negative and I'm O positive. My teacher said I think your mom has some explaining to do. And we all chuckled. Turned out, he was not my father. A horse threw me in the air when I was a child, but I wasn't on his back. He grabbed the skin of my back with his teeth and yeeted me. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. New videos every day. Check out our playlist.